All right, so in section 1.1, we're going to be looking at the different types of data that can be collected and from whom and how do we organize that information once we have collected it. So, what a researcher will do is whenever they're doing a study, is first decide who it is that they're going to collect information from. And that is what we are going to call cases. Now, if you ever have read any maybe literature articles, you might be have heard or seen like a different word used, like the subjects. But more simply, it's going to be either the people, the places, the animals, whatever it is that you are studying or whoever it is you're studying, and it's from them that you're going to be collecting data. So the types of data that you collect for them might be things like for some reason you might need their height, you might need their gender, you might need some sort of like size of, you know, clothes that they wear, shoes that they wear, whatever it is that you're going to be measuring. Now, once you collect the data, there's going to be two different types. One of them is going to be known as a categorical variable. So categorical variable. And you'll know that something is a categorical variable anytime that you see that it's based on groups. So groups, again, could be like gender, male, female. It could be you're collecting people's opinions, like, do you believe in this? So you have like the yes group, the no group, but usually it's two or more groups. I guess another classic example would be like high school classification, freshmen, sophomore, junior, seniors. You'd have four different groups. The other type of piece of information that you can collect is going to be something that might be a quantitative variable. So quantitative, quantitative meaning that when you see this type of information, it's going to be something that's numerical based. So that could be like people's ages, if you're doing by like how many years old they are, you're 18 years old, 21 years old, 44 years old. Another giveaway that something is going to be quantitative is you're going to be able to take all the numbers from every person that you surveyed or every person that you collected data from, and you'd be able to calculate the average. Like what's the kind of like the middle number. And the last thing about quantitative information is that they're going to be associated with some type of units like inches, years, percent, feet, if you're maybe doing how tall people are. Now, once you collect all your data, again, these are things that whenever you're doing your study, you'll be deciding, am I collecting things that are categorical, quantitative, from who am I collecting it? Then once you do collect all that information, you got to organize it. And those are known as data sets. Data sets, which you can already see one down here. This is an example of a data set that's about movies. The variables are going to be things that are either quantitative, categorical, but the way that data sets are structured is very specific. First of all, you got rows and columns. And what's happening in each of the columns is going to be each variable. All right. So if you have four different variables, you're going to have four different columns. Then what you're going to have, since you're going to have, again, just using kind of people here, just very generically, as just a classic example. We're doing a study about people, then each row is going to be dedicated to each person. So row number one is going to have person one, and all their information for each of the variables. So let's look at an example. All right, now again, this here is a data set, and it is about movies, right? And it's actually a really long list of movies. They're just showing us six of the movies that were included in their data set. And as far as like the very first movie, you're gonna have all of its information in just this first row. Now, when you look at the first column here, now you're thinking, wait, what isn't this column one? Column one right here is really just an identifier, like the name of each movie. It's not a variable. It's just an identifier. This column right here is what studio is the one who made that particular movie. So the first movie, Insidious, was made by Sony. And then you've got Harry Potter movie was made by Warner Brothers and so on. And so since these are different groups, this would be a categorical variable. Each movie belonged to a different studio. Next to that would be column number two. Again, this is what we're officially calling column one because it's our first variable. And then you see the rating. This would be a quantitative variable because it's specifically about numbers. It's rating, like how much did people enjoy, like the movie, think that it was successful. You can see somewhere like in the 60s, 70s, 90s. And what we could do is we could average those out. Like what was the average rating? Then we got genre, which is also going to be categorical. Again, there are things like rom-coms where they're like a mixture of two genres. But if they had to put each of these movies in a specific group, that was horror, fantasy, comedy, drama, so on, so on. And then the last two, I'll let you do them, right? Just you see numbers. Right? So if you see numbers, it'll be quantitative stuff. Okay. Budget, how much did they make? Or how much did they cost to make these movies? And it's 1.5 would be 1.5 million. They've got that expressed up here. And also be with respect to dollars. And then how much did they make on the opening weekend, right? When they just came out onto the screen, how much money did each of these make? You can see some did better than others or made more money than others. Now, when it comes to the homework, there's going to be some stuff that's just going to be, hey, just one word, two words, and there's going to be other stuff where you've got to describe some things. So for the very first thing, it's asking who or what were the cases? That's your subjects. Who was it that data was being collected from? You could put Hollywood movies, or just even simpler, we could put this study was about movies. And we've already done part B, but whenever it comes to the homework, I mean, you could do it this way. You could say, well, there was some stuff, some of the information was quantitative, some of it was categorical. The quantitative information was the rating, the budget, and how much money that these movies made on opening weekend. And then those two things within the data set that were categorical, you've got what was the studio, and then you've also got the genre, the type of movie. And so again, this is kind of just to give you an example. Whenever you get to the homework, sort of, some of these are going to be just spend most of your time reading and understanding the information, understanding what's in the data set. Then as far as like the actual responses, pretty quick, short bullet point answers. These first two don't need any sort of explanation, just answer, answer, answer. But then there will be some where you got to be a little bit more detailed, kind of give me a little bit more juice as to like, okay, contextually, what's going on? What are you thinking about? In this problem C or part C is asking, what is a question that you could ask that would require us to have to compare two different columns of information? And so this is kind of up to you. I mean, we could do something like this, like which studio tends to get better ratings, or you could do something like, which genres tend to cost more or have bigger budgets. So, I mean, there's a variety of questions that you could ask, but it just needs to make sure that your question does how somehow in some way would require us to have to look at these two columns to see whether there's a difference amongst the groups. So I'm going to go with a question like which genre or genres tend to have larger budgets. And again, for that type of question, you would have to look at the column of the different types of movies and then also look at the budgets. And if you look at it, you can also see which genres do tend to have bigger budgets, and I think you can see it, right? And probably what your eyes are kind of catching hold of is the fantasy and action, most likely because of like all the special effects and the stunts. Now, the other thing that we're going to be looking at, well, actually, this is just a quick quiz, right? I mean, let's suppose we're doing part A together. Just a quick little, what were we doing just a second ago? Again, if they did a study that was asking U.S. citizens whether they support or do not support gun control. The first part they're looking for is like what would be the cases. So who was it that they collected information from? Short answer would be the U.S. citizens. I think of that one that would be it'd be better to not just put citizens because you got maybe Canadian citizens, citizens from like Mexico. So this one was specifically targeting those in the U.S. And then what would be the variable? Like what was it that they wanted to know from these individuals? It was this: support or do not support gun control. All right. And then think about if someone were to ask you or me that question, what would be the likely responses? It would either be yes, we do, or no, we don't. So it's either you're in the yes group, the no group. So this would be categorical. So you've got gun control would be the variable, and you'd have a column of people who said either yes or no. And this would be categorical. Now, take a moment for yourself to try part B. Again, that you can either pause the video, try it. Again, also just kind of be quiet for maybe about 10 seconds here, assuming that you're gonna try B. All right. So for B, again, the cases would be who, from whom, or what they were trying to collect information from. In this case, it's a who, it's college students. And I think it would be worth putting college and not just students because we've got high school students, we've got college students, and there's a big difference between whether you're a high school student or a college student. You experience different things, take different classes. So college students, and then the variable was how the hours of sleep. So you could put hours of sleep, you could just put sleep, but since it was hours, it'd be you're getting 7 hours, you're getting 6 hours, you're getting 4 hours, you're getting 12 hours. It'd be a number thing, so it'd be quantitative. So hours of sleep, and know this that if someone writes hours of sleep on the homework, suppose this was like the homework question, and someone else puts just sleep, you got it. That's the main thing is that you capture the variable and just some sort of like little nickname for it. Now, I do this next example because, sometimes the way they ask the questions are a little bit different. This one's not asking like an A, it's not asking what were the cases or who were the cases. It's asking how many. So what you might do first of all in this one is just recognize that pigeons are the cases. It was a study about pigeons. Now, again, I want you to take a moment, maybe about, I don't know, I'm just going to be quiet for about 30 seconds. Read the prompt. And as you read the prompt, underline these two things, right? How many cases there were, and then how many variables there were. See if you can underline just the key little pieces of information so you'll be able to find out how many cases and how many variables there were. And again, I'm going to be quiet for about maybe 30 seconds. Again, these little pauses that I'm doing is either you can pause the video or that way, and it's just like the way I would do like with an in-person class. I try to not just always just boom, here's the answer, here's the answer. Give students an opportunity to try to use the little bit of information that you gotten from the lecture, from the previous examples, and then use that. Now, on this one here, truthfully, this study actually was much bigger than what they're unveiling here. Is actually a data set with like thousand, more than 1,000 homing pigeons. But this particular segment of it is focusing on the top seven finishers, the seven fastest pigeons in the study. The other thing is there was only two variables. One of them was the speed, how fast they were, and then the other one was whether they were male or oh here, I'll put it right here, whether it was a male bird or a female bird. And those are the only two. So when it comes down to now asking, as far as like the variables, what were they? You can say one of them was the speed, and the other one you could put either like sex or gender. And gender being that it was either only they were either male or a female bird, it would be C, and speed because it was based on number wise, the yards per minute, that'd be quantitative. All right. Now, what we're going to do next is mainly a quick little reminder that data sets are specifically rows and columns, right? And so what they do is they do one row for each case and they do one column for each variable. So if you're looking at this, this is not a data set, right? This right here is just a table of the information. And so if you're saying, okay, well, I'm going to change this into a data set, since you have two variables, you're going to need two two columns. One for the speed and one for the gender of the bird. Now, that does not count as an actual row. Okay, that row right there is just a like the labels for your columns. What counts as an official like row one would be for your first pigeon that you have here. So we're going to start with our very first hen who had a speed of 1676. So you're going to put the speed where the speed goes, 1676, and then you're going to put the gender that it was a hen. Then you're going to move on to bird number two. The second bird had a speed of 1452, was also a hen. Then we got one more hen. This would be the third bird. You put their speed. So that takes care of your three female pigeons, and then now you move over to the male birds. So you'll need a few more of these. One, two, three. And then the fourth one will be just right underneath there. So I'm just going to go ahead and put, we got four male birds. That'll be it. Then we'll go ahead and put in their speeds, 1458, 1435, and 1418. And 1413. Now, the numbers that I'm putting here to the side, you don't actually need to put these. Um, but that would be, I mean, if we were to give the birds names, it'd be bird one, two, three, four, five, six, and seven. But usually this would be maybe where you might put like student one, student two, student three, student four, if you were doing a collecting data from students in school. All right, so that is again just to re-illustrate that whenever you're doing data sets, you have one column for each of your variables, and then each row is dedicated to a specific case, like a person or an animal who you collected data from. Now, the last thing that we're going to do here, and then start to wrap up this lesson, is just do a mention about relationships. So that's one of the biggest things that we're looking for in statistics is this variable somehow related to this second variable? It is sort of, we are going to be getting into like cause and effect once we get into experiments. Does this first thing cause this second thing to somehow change for better or for worse? And in the example here, if you've ever noticed maybe someone lacking endurance, or maybe trying to improve their endurance, one of the ways that they can do that is maybe by doing some jogging. So if you see someone who's got what looks to be like pretty good endurance, like man, how are you able to go for so long or do that thing for the extent that you're able to? They might explain to you, well, the reason why I can do that is because of my time that is spent jogging. So it's the first, the second thing, and it's always in this order. that the explanatory variable is what happens first, and it explains why we're seeing such a response. And I know it's not officially here in the lecture, but I'll do one that we're probably going to be all familiar with. If you want to get a good grade in this class, you kind of fill in the blank, right? If you see someone who has really good grades, put something in the question mark. What is it that would be an explanation as to why they ended up getting good grades? And again, you can just think of a few in your own mind here. Uh, Probably what some of us are thinking of is what you got to study, you got to go to class, you got to do the homework. That's a Now, for this example here is, can eating yogurt as compared to not eating cause people to lose weight measured in pounds? So this is kind of just to reiterate like kind of the main stuff today. That being cases, variables, the different types of variables. In this case, who or what are the cases? In other words, who were they collecting data from? To be the people. And that's all we know. Just very generically people. The two variables. Again, there's a first thing and a second thing, but right now B is just asking just to give both of them. The first one would be eating yogurt, and the second thing would be lose weight. Now, one thing that I did whenever I was making this handout was I went ahead and put in there just a little bit what I thought was sort of the way they were doing this is whether someone ate yogurt or didn't. They didn't have anything in there about, how many servings, one serving, two servings, or how many cups that you eat a day. So it seemed like it was just whether you're a yes or no kind of person. So to kind of help out, I went ahead and put that in there that it's either you do or you don't, which is you're in the I do eat yogurt group or I don't. So it'd be categorical. And then for the losing weight, if it was based on how many pounds you lost, that's a number thing. It has units. That's something you could average out. That'd be quantitative. And then all we're doing here is just layering on is like which of the things would happen first to affect the second thing, which be, their whole hunch here is that maybe if you eat yogurt, that might improve your weight. In this case, that maybe lose weight, weight loss. Now, I've got a couple more here that again you can pause the video. Again, I'm just going to be probably quiet for about 10 seconds just to again to suggest that that's sort of the motivation is to go ahead and pause me and try to do these and these is like what thing's going to happen first and what thing would happen second because you do that first thing. And for this one, just use your everyday. What do you normally see or kind of anticipate happening in just your everyday life? Again, I'll be quiet for about 10 seconds and give you a chance to or pause the video so you can try both of try A and B by yourself. Okay. So typically what we notice is that if somebody meditates, maybe the purpose is that they're going to reduce their stress. You got meditation, maybe it's going to help reduce stress. Then for the second one, it's usually the first thing that's going to happen is that they might eat sugar. Now, if you wrote sugar consumption, perfect. Again, using a very close synonym is perfect on the homework. So if you don't exactly write sugar consumption, but let's say this was the homework problem and you wrote eat sugar, you're good. And then because of eating sugar, what you might notice in students is in the children is hyperactivity or their level of hyperactivity. And that's the main thing that I need to make sure to address with this section here. But then I went ahead and added, again, these are things over the semesters that I've taught this class that students tend to be curious about or wonder or get even in some situations like confused about. One of those things being that, you know, the Likert scale. You probably have seen these because if you ever done like a professor's like evaluation, they'll say, you know, did the professor do this? Yes, I agree, disagree, strongly disagree. It's like in this case, it's like one, two, three, four, five, where um, I've looked it up. You can look it up as well. You know, is this something that's categorical? Is this something that's quantitative? And I think some of us are going to look at this and think, oh, well, this is quantitative because you can see the numbers. But there are some who put Likert scales um, into categorical because it's only like a limited number of groups. Like there's the people who strongly disagree, then you got people who are in the strongly agree group, so they put it in C. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put or Q because of the number thing. And because once you have all those numbers about a professor or professors, is you can average them out to see what was the average, rating. So on the homework, you can put either C or Q, depending on whether you feel like it feels more like just limited number of groups, or whether you feel too strongly that no, this is more like a number thing. You can go either way. I'll take the answer either way. The other thing that you've got to be careful about is not to assume immediately that because you see something like age or any other variable that could be handled differently, that it's immediately Q or it's immediately C. You got to look at the context and make sure that you see how are they actually measuring the variable or how are they collecting it. So if it was age, I think a lot of us right away just seeing the word age, you're going to think quantitative. And that would be true if age was being collected based on how many years old the individuals are. That'd be quantitative. But suppose that they were to take age and make it to where there's like intervals, like people who are like from 8 to 12, and those who are from like 13 to 17, or those who are from like 25 to 34, and they start grouping them based on intervals. So these are a way that they might collect the data, but whenever they have the column, they have like child, and this person is a teen, and this person is adult. They don't have their specific age, then they're treating it and collecting the information in a categorical manner. So just make sure you double check that you see the way that they're handling the information. Is it based on units or is it based on groups? It varies, it can change, so just be careful. And the other thing I noticed that sometimes students will get confused about is if they see the result and they think, well, the result is quantitative, so the variable must be, if the result is quantitative, then it must mean that the variable itself was quantitative. But no, there's like a timeline with regarding the data. So what I want to say is that sometimes when you collect the data, it may be categorical, but then in the result, the summary, like the ending of the article, it might switch uh, to like a number or vice versa. So here's an example. Here's what I mean is that they did a study that was asking people in a survey if they believe that there was a sixth sense, like this extra power where people could maybe like read your mind or do something special like that. And some people said the choices were either yes, no, or don't know, which is just three options, right? And again, this is a categorical thing. Categorical things are either like two or more groups or two or more options. So the way they collected the data or the way that it was asked of people was just that it was a categorical variable. And that's all that 1.1 is all about, right? Who you're collecting data from, is it categorical, is it quantitative? When we get to section 2.1, that's when we're going to start actually looking at the results of the study. That's going to be the first time where we start looking at the results of the study. And in this one, just kind of a sneak peek, they found out that about 60% of people who were surveyed believe that yes, sixth sense was a thing that maybe really did exist and that people do have this extra sense or power, which would be the result. And it being that it's a number and it's also got units, which would be the percent sign, that would be a quantitative result. So the variable is categorical, but the result switched to quantitative. And I'll leave you just one more thing. Is there ever a chance that something is like quantitative to begin and it ends at being categorical? And yeah, I mean, just think about this class. You know, I think the goal is that if we wanted, a number, like what number would you be happy with to finish this term and finish this class with? I mean, some of you might be thinking, well, I mean, I'd be happy with of course, we'd all love a 100, but if we at least got like a 90 or a 95 or a 94, that'd be great. And so that would be what we start. That would be what we first have in the grade book, a quantitative thing. But then at the end, it's going to get switched to being an A in your transcript as the result. And so it'd go from a Q to a C. So it wouldn't start off as a Q, but then switch to a C, switch to a quantitative to a categorical. So again, things like could change the way they're collected initially, but then the result switches over to the other type of variable. But that's all that I've got for this section. Again, use the lecture notes as you move on to the homework for 1.1. Refer to the lecture notes as a model of sort of the expectation of which are the questions where it's just like one word, two-word answers, and then which are the ones where maybe you got to write a little bit more detail. But I'm going to go ahead and end the recording there.